Good morning, welcome to be here. This is the first event of the European project Enneadi with project leader Futura. We have Mrs. Vignocchi, and the topic of this seminar is Nutrition and Disability, a challenge to improve life quality. It is a topic that we consider as very important. Over the years, we focused on this topic as the Association Amici di Luca e Casa dei Risvegli, together with Mr. Piperno, who activated several insights, and then we organized several meetings with Silvana Reglia, who is one of our panelists today, and we published her book To Feed the Brain. Very interesting publication, collecting articles published in the Amici di Luca magazine, together with some reflections and analysis reflecting her skills. This book was really successful, and we organized some theme dinners in order to show how nutrition can be helpful for our brain, and so we applied several approaches even in the Giornata dei Risvegli. So let's give the floor to Elena Vignocchi. Good morning. Thank you for being here with us. We thought about the possibility of organizing this conference on site, and we decided to organize it live because it's very important to go back to the on-site events. My name is Elena Vignocchi. I'm the project leader of the Enneadi project. We were born in the 70s as vocational training centers in San Giovanni in Persiceto e San Pietro e Casale, and then we enlarged our training offer and service offer. So we are a public company for vocational training and development in 8 municipalities in the area of Bologna. Since 2010, we also take part in European projects in order to support the territory, and the collaboration with Amici di Luca, which started in the year 2000 for training project funded by the Bologna area, and then we understood that this was a real excellent and which had to be brought abroad. In our opinion, it was very important to share this experience, so we launched several European initiatives with a lifelong learning program with the LUCA acronym, so based on training for carers, in particular for people dealing with coma hit patients, and LUCA through sports with the Italian sports centers. We developed a project on Erasmus Plus sport in order to identify methodology involving family members as well, so not just the person with acquired disability but also relatives. It was easier to work probably with countries similar with similar culture compared to Italy. So after the project Lucas, this project was developed with Mr. Piperno and the Neurological Science Institute and Casa dei Risvegli and Professor Reglia of the Department of Life Sciences in Bologna. So the idea was to develop a KA2, so innovative partnerships for innovation inside VET, Vocational Education Training. The project was approved at a second attempt. The first application was addressed to all the people surrounding the person with disability, even relatives, while then the feedback we received was to target more this project on professionals. So maybe tomorrow we can enlarge this project and involve even family members. So, funded by Erasmus Plus European Union. The project duration is 2 years. We started last year, and between the kickoff and the project implementation, there was COVID, so some things changed. But luckily, we are able to comply with our timeline. So we will end November 22. The first meeting was held online, but on time. We will see later on the actions required, and we will start again, and we will hold meetings even in presence. We are going to Valencia as well, so we will have hybrid events, so duration 2 years. What was the initial concern? Projects are usually developed in order to improve a certain situation or to solve an issue, and the original idea was to start observing the situation. You often refer to nutrition, healthy lifestyle, but never in relation with the person with acquired disability. On the contrary, these people risk higher problems because their sedentary lifestyle can lead to obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases. And so in people with disability, for example, sedentarity or an incorrect nutrition can have even more severe consequences. So, by analyzing curricula in pre-project phase, we realized that training was not specifically developed for experts and professionals. So some professionals have skills linked to disability. Some other professionals maybe are highly specialized in nutrition, but these skills are rarely linked to disability, for example. So we thought that these profiles were crucial in order to raise awareness within and among people with disability, not just the physician, but also, for example, sports coaches. And so we decided with this project to fill this gap. So we decided to address this project to professionals. We will then see a specific list of professionals, and of course the beneficiaries of this project are people with disability, and of course their lifestyle that can be improved. We always refer to neurological disability in relation to a trauma like a brain injury or spine injury. We will, of course, widen our focus and scope to disability, to acquired disability, but this is in detail our target. And the goals are the ones mentioned. So make sure that all professionals and stakeholders can acquire a basis of knowledge on the topic of disability and nutrition, and of course the relationship between these two topics. After a methodological review of training curricula and pathways, we will create an e-learning training pathway that will be divided into modules and will be offered to professionals at several levels. We can have like health operators who need specific skills, while maybe a physician needs to be updated and refresh on specific studies, the latest studies in the topic. So it's very important to raise awareness among partners and local stakeholders on the importance of these good practices in relation with life quality and nutrition. And then we have the intellectual output. So when you apply for a project for these strategic partnerships for innovation, it's not just an exchange, but you need to prepare these outputs. The first was already concluded, and Paola Sabata is going to present it. Is the definition of guidelines on practical training methodologies for professionals who work with people with acquired disabilities, starting from scientific researches and from an analysis that we conducted at the beginning of a training curricula of these professionals. But Paola is going to describe all the actions we undertook to draft these guidelines. And then we have this phase we are in, and Mr. Malaguti is going to describe it, the development of a specific course for professionals on nutrition habits, but also providing a training on acquired disability. And the third output, it's the e-learning course that will be available online, with interaction available as well, and it can be part of existing training courses. So you can follow this module alone, so for like a refresher course, but it can also be part of, for example, university degree curricula, or while training to become health worker. So this is just a part. It can be therefore followed independently or as a part of something bigger and to be included in standard curricula. So having this insight is not an exception, but is integrated in the training pathway. And then we have policy recommendations contributing to promote these training modules by including them in existing curricula, because the risk of European project is that you develop things and knowledge for 2 years, but then there is not a continuum, and they, on the contrary, this project must be sustainable, and of course all the findings must be used even in the future. So policy recommendation. So the first intellectual output was managed by Spain, second the University of Bologna, third Futura, and the fourth Lithuania. So we divided responsibilities among partners. The expected results have been described already, so we will define these innovative methodologies for education developed mutually by all partners. So it's not just the University of Bologna writing the content, but we will collect contributions by all partners divided by specific skills. And then we have this experimentation and dissemination of tools that must happen among all beneficiaries and the professionals involved in the project. Here you see a list of professionals, health professionals working with people with acquired disability, therapists, logopedists, occupational therapists, and then dietitians and nutrition experts, physicians, nurses, and of course they are all involved in this project, and then psychologists, social workers, trainers, social educators, but also physical activity experts, health operators, and then family carers, because one of the first feedback we had from focus groups is the importance of multidisciplinarity, the fact of having a multi-professional staff. This is crucial to better help the person with acquired disability in order to improve its life quality. And it is very important to have an interaction among several professionals. There is also, for example, a motivational aspect. This could be competence of a sports coach or psychologist, because they work with this person and they increase awareness on the importance of a healthy nutrition. If all professionals are aware of these topics, they are better conveyed to the concerned person. So training and awareness raising. And then we have the communication channels of the project. You can find them even online on Google. You see the web addresses. The first address is the website of our project, which is available in several languages. You already find the first intellectual output published, and then we have Facebook, Twitter. I already mentioned the partners, but I would like to describe them quickly. We have Futura, University of Bologna, the Department for Life Quality Sciences, Nueva Opción from Spain, Daño Cerebral Querido, but Paula is going to pronounce it better, association created by family members of people with an acquired brain injury. And it was already involved in the first European project, and it is working with the Association Amici di Luca. So they work in synergy, at twinning, even at theater level, they are moving together. And then we have Šiauliai University, Vilnius University, that's the new name. They were our partners in the Lucas project on sports, and they continue working with us. It's a university. They also deal with the topic of disability nutrition, adapted sports, and so on. Associated partner, very important, because with them the idea was created. Associazione Amici di Luca, the Neurological Institute of Bologna, and a Swedish region Orewa. Hope they can connect with us via Zoom, and they will help us in disseminating the outputs in Sweden as well. As Fulvio said, this event is included in the Awakening Day national but also European level. Thanks to this project, since 2015, we involved other European countries, not just Lithuania and Spain, but also Denmark, Portugal, Belgium, with the Coma Science Group, with which we worked on the first project, and we hope to have Greece and Bulgaria, so several partner countries, and the awareness about the topic is further developed. So we keep on sharing the outputs developed in European projects. Thank you, Elena. Next year we will take part in the worldwide Day on Coma. It will be held in Belgium and it will embrace the entire European area. And Elena Vignocchi already introduced Paola Sabaterio, the Nueva Opción. We are twinned with this association. We will go to Spain mid-November for this conference, but also to launch our theater drama. And we will go to Madrid and Valencia, and in this theater we made some rehearsal, and we already work with the Dehon Theatre as well. So the name of the drama will be Pinocchio. So she's going to describe guidelines on methodologies and education practices addressed to professionals working with people with acquired disability. To you the floor, Paola.
Hi Elena, hi Fulvio. Sorry,
Buongiorno Elena, non posso purtroppo parlare italiano e quindi faccio la presentazione in inglese. Innanzitutto vorrei ringraziarvi tantissimo, ringraziare gli organizzatori per questo invito, per avermi invitato qui oggi. Sono qui a nome di Nuova Opción, un'associazione che ha base a Valencia ed è un'organizzazione no profit regionale. Io vi presenterò i primi risultati del progetto dell'Intellectual Outcome 1. Ho registrato un video per evitare problemi di connessione internet o rumori di sottofondo, però io comunque sono qui qualora voi alla fine abbiate delle domande da pormi. Grazie. Penso che dobbiate lanciare voi il video.
Well, so I'm going to share with you the progress of Enneadi project and the activities performed so far.
Fino ad oggi.
So now we have finished
Allora,
the first intellectual output,
il primo
which
intellectual
is a
output
document including
che
guidelines on training and
linee guida sulla formazione, metodologie educative e pratiche mirate, indirizzate ai professionisti che lavorano regolarmente con persone con disabilità acquisite. Cominciamo con la definizione delle esigenze di formazione, perché il primo intellectual output mira a definire le linee comuni per i professionisti di formazione e assistere le persone con disabilità acquisite, sulla base di lavori precedenti che ci hanno permesso di identificare il mix giusto di questi professionisti e che include quindi una ricerca sui curricula preliminari in Lituania, Italia e Spagna, e poi identificazione delle buone pratiche a livello europeo. Faremo un'analisi dei profili occupazionali nella classificazione europea delle competenze, delle qualifiche, delle occupazioni. Faremo anche un test, abbiamo sviluppato un test di autovalutazione, un questionario all'interno di questo progetto e i professionisti lavoreranno con persone con disabilità acquisite. Infine abbiamo sviluppato un focus group nei 3 paesi partecipanti al progetto. Ecco i risultati dell'analisi preliminare. Abbiamo realizzato 779, abbiamo esaminato 769 corsi universitari in Spagna, Italia e Lituania. 42% di questi corsi sono collegati alla nutrizione nel loro curricula, 31% comprendevano formazione sulla disabilità e solo l'1% includeva formazione sulla nutrizione e le persone con disabilità. Questa ultima cifra, questa ultima percentuale, l'1%, è il 2% in Spagna, 0% in Lituania e quasi 0% in Italia, 0,003%. Questa analisi ha messo in evidenza la mancanza di formazione sulle esigenze nutrizionali delle persone con disabilità nei curricula professionali indirizzati a professionisti che dovrebbero lavorare con queste persone e quindi sia a livello operativo che della letteratura nell'ambito scientifico, la conseguenza è che anche nella formazione, nei curricoli di formazione di professionisti che solitamente assistono persone con disabilità acquisite, c'è un'assenza generalizzata di moduli di formazione sulle raccomandazioni nutrizionali per le persone con disabilità acquisite. Abbiamo lavorato con ESCO. ESCO è la classificazione di competenze, e qualifiche e occupazioni. Ha preparato una forma di dizionario per identificare e classificare le occupazioni, le professionalità, le competenze rilevanti per il mercato del lavoro europeo e per la formazione professionale. Quindi questo progetto è stato utilizzato come strumento comune per analizzare gruppi di professioni che normalmente lavorano con persone affette da disabilità acquisite, in particolare quelle neurologiche a seguito di eventi traumatici. In questo progetto le occupazioni più di interesse includono i medici, fisioterapisti, logopedisti, terapisti occupazionali, infermieri, dietisti, nutrizionisti, specialisti nell'adattamento delle attività fisiche, psicologi, operatori sociali, educatori sociali. Il risultato di questa analisi sono in linea con i risultati delle ricerche preliminari nazionali e hanno messo in evidenza l'assenza dell'inclusione della nutrizione in molti corsi destinati a questi professionisti. Il test di autovalutazione è stato creato in questo progetto e include 21 domande suddivise in 4 principali sezioni: dati sociodemografici, conoscenza generale sulla nutrizione, conoscenza generale sul cibo, sugli alimenti, conoscenza generale sulle disabilità acquisite. Abbiamo fatto una prima versione che è stata testata con i professionisti e poi abbiamo avuto la versione finale che è stata seguita da 61 professionisti dai 3 paesi del progetto. In termini generali i partecipanti ci hanno dato un gran numero di domande, quindi avevano una buona conoscenza generale sulla nutrizione, sugli alimenti e sulle disabilità acquisite. Questi risultati spiegano da una parte che il test di autovalutazione ha incontrato delle difficoltà perché abbiamo lavorato con un grande numero di specialisti nel gruppo di focus group e poi le risposte sono state date perché avevano una grande motivazione questi professionisti. In linea generale le risposte date alle domande sono state tutte corrette e alcune esigenze di nutrizioni, informazioni sulle nutrizioni erano veramente dovute appunto a un basso livello di conoscenza della nutrizione come scienza. Abbiamo poi creato quindi un questionario allo scopo di valutare l'atteggiamento verso la nutrizione. È stato diviso in due sezioni, dati sociodemografici e 12 domande sugli atteggiamenti nutrizionali. È stato utilizzato da 28 professionisti questo questionario e quasi tutti gli intervistati pensano che l'atteggiamento abbia una forte influenza nel miglioramento della salute e i professionisti hanno considerato importante o estremamente importante avere conoscenze di base sulla nutrizione nella loro attività quotidiana e quindi pensano anche che questa popolazione abbia delle esigenze nutrizionali specifiche che devono essere prese in considerazione e non sottovalutate. Hanno anche ritenuto importante incorporare l'educazione sul cibo, sugli alimenti nei programmi di riabilitazione e ritengono anche che i nutrizionisti, i dietologi sono le persone più adatte ad occuparsi della qualità della nutrizione delle persone con disabilità acquisite. Hanno anche riconosciuto con i caregiver, le famiglie, che devono partecipare e sostenere le istruzioni dietetiche di questi pazienti. E secondo i partecipanti al questionario tutti i professionisti devono esserci delle formazioni specifiche formazioni specifiche sulla nutrizione dedicata a questo tipo di pazienti. Abbiamo poi organizzato dei focus group e 33 professionisti hanno partecipato come specialisti a causa delle limitazioni dovute al Covid. 2 sessioni sono state tenute online in ogni paese con 4-5 specialisti in ogni sessione. E il focus group è consistito in 7 domande che dovevano essere discusse tra i professionisti. Qui avete l'elenco delle 7 domande che sono state utilizzate per stimolare la discussione. Poi abbiamo fatto una SWOT analisi, un'analisi SWOT per discutere di tutti gli aspetti, i punti deboli, i punti di forza, le minacce, le opportunità, gli aspetti quindi positivi e negativi, i contesti e le circostanze. Quindi sulla base dei risultati tratti dai lavori precedenti abbiamo definito delle linee guida sui temi più importanti, le metodologie e gli strumenti che devono essere mettere al centro dei corsi di formazione per le pratiche nutrizionali migliori per i pazienti con disabilità acquisite. In modo particolare le linee guida hanno 6 sezioni specifiche, i gruppi target da includere, i contesti di formazione specifici, obiettivi a breve e a lungo termine, contenuti principali da trattare, metodologie educative, metodi di disseminazione o di divulgazione. E la parte più importante sono i contenuti che dovranno essere sviluppati nel prossimo Intellectual Output, nel quale ci focalizzeremo sui contenuti. L'analisi preliminare sui curricula effettuate nei 3 paesi, la ricerca delle buone pratiche a livello europeo, l'analisi dei profili occupazionali secondo la classificazione ESCO, i risultati del questionario e test di valutazione e le conclusioni raggiunti dai focus group ci hanno permesso di definire un elenco di contenuti formativi che possono soddisfare le esigenze identificate e quindi evidenziati dai focus group. Ecco i contenuti principali che sono stati divisi in 4 aree, in 4 moduli principali. Il primo modulo riguarda conoscenza generale sulle disabilità acquisite, il secondo conoscenza generale sulla nutrizione, terzo nutrizione e disabilità acquisite e l'ultimo, il quarto, abitudini alimentari preventive. Quindi nel primo modulo, conoscenze generali sulle disabilità acquisite, abbiamo incluso una fase introduttiva, malattie patologiche, strumenti per comprendere la disabilità, disabilità acquisite, diverse fasi della disabilità acquisita, principali patologie associate alle persone con disabilità e l'ultimo disfagia, dedicato appunto alla disfagia. Nel secondo modulo, conoscenze generali sulla nutrizione, avremo come contenuti 6 unità: biochimica della nutrizione, concetti di base, composizione degli alimenti, malnutrizione, obesità e altre alterazioni della composizione corporea, conoscenza di base sul cibo sano, gruppi di alimenti e consistenze, molto importante per le persone con disabilità acquisite, e per ultimo l'unità miti sulle esigenze nutrizionali. Per quanto riguarda il modulo numero 3, nutrizione e disabilità acquisite, avremo delle unità su raccomandazioni ufficiali di malattie metaboliche, esigenze speciali delle persone con disabilità acquisite per quanto riguarda gli aspetti nutrizionali, aspetti psicologici dell'alimentazione, influenza dei farmaci sul metabolismo, interazione tra l'alimentazione e i farmaci, alterazione della masticazione della capacità di ingoiare, supervisione durante l'ingestione, screening nelle cliniche e per concludere l'ultimo modulo sulle abitudini preventive alimentari, come elaborare una dieta bilanciata, promuovere l'autonomia nella gestione del cibo, quantità di cibo secondo l'attività fisica e raccomandazioni nutrizionali di base per le persone con disabilità acquisite. Quindi abbiamo ora il documento finale con le linee guida pubblicato sul nostro sito web e ora stiamo cominciando l'Intellectual Output 2 e stiamo sviluppando i contenuti e alcuni di questi saranno testati a Valencia in Spagna la prossima settimana. Questo è tutto da parte mia, vi ringrazio molto e buona giornata a tutti.
Is next month.
Sì, prossimo mese, non la prossima settimana, mi sono sbagliata. Quindi ora se avete domande sull'Intellectual Output 1 sono disponibile a rispondere, grazie.
Ecco, non so se è il caso di fare una discussione adesso.
So, I don't know if we have questions and answers now, or maybe we can have question and answers at the end. So Silvana said at the end. So let's continue with our conference. So now I would like to invite here Marco Malaguti, University of Bologna, Department of Sciences for the Life Quality. So he's going to discuss about the expected results for a training course addressed to professionals working with people with acquired disability and focusing on nutrition and habits. First of all, thank you for being here this morning. In my short presentation, I would like to give you an overview of what we have to wait and to see in the future months. Many details were already discussed by the previous speakers.
Perfetto, un'altra. Quindi andiamo a vedere quelli che sono il secondo
forward.
e il terzo output del nostro progetto. Siamo nella fase in cui stiamo appunto sviluppando il secondo output, questo è necessariamente
the second output must be read and imagined strictly connected to the third one. Second, as Paola said, represents the design and development of a future e-learning course by combining all the contents that we listed, while the third output will concern the practical implementation of this e-learning course. This is the e-learning course architecture that we are envisaging. It is going to capitalize everything we did until today. An e-learning course will start with a placement test so that the user can be oriented towards one of the modules characterizing the learning course. Many professionals that can be involved in this kind of training, so we will have professionals with a strong specialization in acquired disability, and at the same time they have a poor knowledge in the nutrition field. So from the placement test we can orient these professionals towards the second module based on nutritional aspect. Vice versa, professionals with a great experience in the nutritional field, of course they won't need training in this area, but maybe they need a module on disabilities, and then there will be professionals who can decide to follow both starting modules. The third one that is shared and common to all participants, it's going to be a specific module concerning nutrition in people with acquired disabilities, and a fourth module which will deal with preventive aspects of nutrition, how nutrition and food can be used in a preventive way. So these are the main modules, and they follow the structure that Paola described before as the result of the first output of the project. We think we can also include other optional modules that are going to touch upon specific aspects which emerge from the analysis of the focus groups carried out in output 1. We will have an additional module describing specific case studies through interviews to doctors following people with acquired disabilities, and we see an example of how the nutrition and food of this subject can have a positive impact. Professionals who took part to the focus group said that sometimes the ability to work in a multidisciplinary team represents an obstacle to the possibility of obtaining effective results, and a huge variety of professionals acting on people with acquired disability can represent a limit. And so we saw that it is important to overcome those obstacles that can emerge in a multidisciplinary work. Two other additional modules will concern a description through interviews of best practices in the nutritional environment, and a fourth additional module that we can entitle Motivation to Change. And we saw that Elena said at the beginning that the final goal, of course, is the quality of life of the individual with acquired disabilities. So providing professionals tools and information on how to impact on the final user and its family, and to receive a motivation in changing one's lifestyle. This is for sure fundamental. So this is the architecture of the e-learning platform that we are going to develop, and we see that every single module is made up by different units. And every single unit will focus a more detailed topic. It will be structured in this way, so an introductory video, a central phase characterized by a development section. It will be a set of presentation in video format, plus a collection of documents, text, links to specific website for all those who want to further analyze the topic. And then you have the self-assessment, because every single unit would be concluded with a self-assessment test with 2-3 questions with multiple choice answer. In Paola's video, we saw the different sections, so I would not explain every single unit. So first module concerns general knowledge on acquired disability, the second on nutrition, and the third and central module will concern nutrition and acquired disabilities, and the last one will concern prevention habits, so how we can use nutrition in a preventive way. So this is the central phase of the Enneadi project, which is going to be concluded with the fourth output. And partners in Vilnius University will be the leading groups of this output, and they will draft policy recommendations so that the project can have an impact in short, medium, long term, so to raise awareness about this topic even at institutional level, so to transform like an e-learning pathway into something more structured by including these topics. Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Marco Malaguti, for your speech. Now I give the floor to Fabio Laporta. He will speak about disability, conceptualization and classification through ICF. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Mrs. Reilly, Mr. Malaguti, because this speech talks about one of the most useful tools that we have to conceptualize, to quantify disability. We will talk about ICF, which is the classifying tool made available by WHO since 2001 in order to classify health conditions and disabilities. In this context, we will talk about ICF, and I will explain how this tool is applied, but we will also focus on the conceptual model at the basis of the ICF, which is the psychosocial model. And we will describe as well the historical evolution of the concept of disabilities, because in this way we can have the right interpretation keys and we can understand the development of ICF and what it can help us in doing. The issue of disabilities is a huge one. From 16 to 19% of people in the world is affected by disabilities, so 1 person out of 5. So people with disabilities represent the largest minority in the world. So we will focus on the biopsychosocial model of ICF as a classifying tool for disabilities. So we will see the historical evolution, this biopsychosocial model, and we could spend hours actually in describing the ICF, but we will see it in practice to show you the power of the approach based on classifying disabilities according to the ICF tool. So, from an historical point of view, we have to define different disability models: moral, medical, social, and impairment, disabilities, and handicap, which was partially at the origin of ICF. Maybe you have seen this movie. It was released a few years ago. It's like an animated series, and it's about warriors, Spartan warriors, which fought Persian warriors. And we have a hero, so the handsome, the good, and the fair Leonida, and we have an antagonist which is ugly, which is a betrayer, and this is the moral model of disability. And the paradigm until 17th century was that disability was like a divine punishment. If you have, for example, physical deformity, and it's because you deserve it, because you or your ancestors or relatives were perpetrating terrible crimes. So disability is considered as a punishment. Starting from the 19th century, with the positivism and the progress of science and medicine, the disability medical model was developed. So it's like a set of impairments at body level that are the outcome of a specific disease. So if you are impaired or you have any kind of disability, it's because you had a disease, and so we have to treat you. And then there is this kind of compassionate behavior, so it is considered as a terrible issue, a tragedy for the family. The disability in the medical model is considered as a problem of the person, impacting negatively on the society. And you have to remember that in 19th century, the capitalism developed, requiring human beings to be highly performing and productive. So what is the solution? So you have medicalization, or you have spectacularization, institutionalization, and some radical approaches, because during the Nazi regime in the 30s, disabled people were like the test bench for the strategies of the humanist massacre. In the 70s, there is a new social model. It was created in the 70s in United Kingdom. So a person with disabilities is exactly as others. Disabilities are not caused by a disease. They can cause impairment. It's not a problem of the person. It is caused by the society. So the society has disabilitating organizations with physical barriers and so on, because this society does not consider the needs of people with disabilities. So it imposes some restrictions to them in their activities, and in the end it excluded them from the main social activities. So the concept completely changes in disabilities conceptualization. So if you cannot work because you have a handicap, because you cannot walk, because it's the responsibility of the society if obstacles do not allow you, for example, to go to work on a wheelchair. So we have to put pressure upon policymakers in order to increase inclusivity and so on. So problem solution relies on the society. Keywords are accessibility, independence and opportunity. And it is a responsibility of governments, local governments and individuals to remove this kind of barriers. And the ultimate goal is to increase participation and involvement so that a person with disabilities can express its utmost potential in order to have a fair society. So this is the equal opportunity concept. This was the 70s. In the 80s, the WHO produced the first international classification of impairments, disability and handicaps,
Impairments, disability ed handicap, quindi denominazione di disabilità e handicap, che rappresenta
which represents the first attempt to classify disability. So it says that we have a disease, like a stroke, causing an impairment, which causes disability and a handicap. So a limitation from a social point of view. So the medical model is proposed once again because the problem relies on the individual. So you have disabilities because you had a disease. And this classification also introduces an obsolete and stigmatizing terminology, handicap, handicapped, or disability, and a different ability. And this conceptual approach does not point out the potential of every single person, even if this person has disabilities. So this is the negative terminology of ICIDH, which does not consider the real potential and the real gift that every person can express. So this is the historical context behind ICF, and in 2001 ICF was ratified as a document on disabilities. Its revision lasted 10 years, and it was based on a new disability model, disability and health, based on which the function of one person, how one person functions, is based on integrity and body functions, the ability to carry out activities and to take part in the society. And this is also influenced by health conditions, but also external or internal factors that have nothing to do with health or functions like environmental or personal functions. The same type of model can be applied to disability conditions. We can have disease, restriction to participation or limitations, which define the condition of disability in relation with this contextual factor. So it's just one model. So through these concepts, we classify and quantify function and disability as the result of the interaction between health and disease and contextual factors. So the difference between function and disability is not based on quality but on quantity. So we place them on the same continuum. So from a theoretical situation of full function, in absence of limitations in activity involvement, while on the other side of the spectrum, we have a complete disability situation, so impairment, body issues, and complete limitation and restriction in participation. And a person can, position itself in any point in this axis, and it can also travel in one direction or the other. So with the biopsychosocial model and ICF, the disability is completely redefined. So now it is any deficit in functions and body structures, plus a limitation of activity and restriction to participation that are the result of the interaction between one disease and external factors like environmental and personal factors. So if we want to improve the quality of life of people and we want to reduce the impact of disability, we have to focus on impairment, on barriers, environmental and personal barriers, and to maximize simplifying factors so that the person can reach its full function and the highest number of opportunities. So the psychosocial model is the conceptual base of ICF. It integrates the two perspectives, the medical and the social model, and it brings about a deep shift, because with the same conceptual method, we can classify both disease conditions and health conditions in terms of disabilities. So the main question when you acquire this and you accept this shift, you have to wonder how his or her disability impact on everyday life and what are their needs. So the revolutionary aspect starts from the language. We had experiences of disabilities in our life. For example, if you have a back pain or backache, and this has an impact on how I function, and it's the experience of most of the population, not just a minority. And the disability experience is part of the experiences that any human being can live sooner or later. While the previous models were applied to a minority, thus creating the favorable conditions for isolation, stigmatization, and so on, this ICF becomes a model allowing us to describe any health condition. So from ICF you have the real classification. We won't see it in detail, but here you can see how we can use this tool. So by applying this ICF classification, we can create a survey like this one, where you have several questions investigating some aspects of the function that are considered as important to define and quantify the life experience of this person in relation to disability. This is a general questionnaire. It includes several questions that were linked to a specific ICF category because they have a specific code, and you can, of course, collect answers in scoring. This is the ICF qualifier, and it is the basis of quantification. So, for example, this man, 71 years old, with brain hemorrhagia. So by administering this questionnaire, we can obtain the quantitative information, so scale, scores, and so on, and they quantify a severe disability, in this case, and with great precision, we can see what is the life experience of this person in relation to its severe disability condition. Here you have body functions, and the qualifier goes to 0, no problem, to 4, severe problems. And at a first glance, we see that there are mental function problems, not many problems with the senses, sight in particular, but this is a very important problem. And we have light or medium severe problems. In red, we have nutrition-related categories and problems as for movement functions. So here we see that there is a restriction in involvement and participation, going from learning to personal care, domestic care, and main areas of life. So this is related to the judgment of severe disability in scoring. We can understand the life condition of this person, and we can understand what impacts more on him or her. Then we can, of course, explore the environmental factors. Here you have support, relationships. In this case, the qualifier changes because you quantify the barriers and simplifications. In this case, we do not have a lot of barriers, but a lot of simplifications. When we administered this survey, we understood that climate conditions have a huge impact on disabilities. I have never thought about it, even if I work in this field for 20 years. So, and then, final summary on quality of life, showing that the life quality of this person is not the best. So ICF used in this way allows us to understand the disability experience from the point of view of the person. It allows us to make discoveries. We can translate the person's language into a standardized language, and it allows us to have descriptive aspects and quantifying aspects, which can be used as a starting point to measure the effectiveness of the intervention. And all this allows us to have problem-solving strategies in relation to individual, to group or subgroup of diseases, and even epidemiological level. Because if we have a wide observation point on a specific disease. A quick consideration at the end. So the 6th century with the moral model and ICF in 21st century. But ICF for sure is not the solution. I don't know if you remembered it. In 2016, the gentleman on the left, during a press conference, put fun on a disabled reporter, and I think it was one of the worst acts of Trump presidency. In 21st century we have the ICF tool, but still a lot of biases and discriminations vis-a-vis people with disabilities. So an action like the Enneadi project can make the difference in a practical way for all people with disabilities. Thank you. Thank you, Fabio Laporta. You saw the evolution is absolutely positive. So, moving the issue to an environmental context, but there's still a lot to do. And this, of course, has an impact on the rights of people with disabilities. The UN Convention was approved by our government on the conditions of people with disabilities, and our government every 3 years releases an action plan. Next one will be released next year, and you find everything in these action plans, all the problems, components concerning an independent life, concerning rights and support, and of course these action plans must be applied, and on application there's still a lot to do. And for example, the last action plan was not implemented by institutions, so still a lot of things to do, but the pathway is the right one. So now we have Roberto Piperno, severe disabilities and policies of health and social protection. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here in such an important event, and I think that the topics we are dealing with are of great relevance, and even this conference on the topic of nutrition and disabilities, I confirm it's not so common, so for sure we need to talk about it further. My speech start from where Fabio Laporta stopped. That was my will. I would like to specify how these aspects are translated into policies and regulations, and of course I will refer to the Italian regulation because I do not have a European overview, even if this can be considered as an interesting topic, so that we can see how in front of these models developed by the scientific community, how they are integrated into the daily life when organizing services for care.
Tutto il ragionamento. Se riesco a capire qual è il tasto per andare avanti, ci provo.
So this slide goes back to what Fabio Laporta said, the ICF biopsychosocial model, and it is interesting to see that there are other models in the background, like the capabilities model, which is a proposal made by Martia Sen, Nobel for Economy, and Marta Nussbaum, the philosopher. She focused a lot on feminism, frailty, marginality, and this model on capabilities also sees the fact of overcoming the definition of disease and environment, and it focuses on the human being as a transformer, as a transforming process into function. And here you have the concept of disability, the concept of poverty, human development. So these are embryo model, but I think it should be worthwhile to keep analyzing them, because they can help us in better understanding the situation. If we consider the Italian regulation, I don't know if you can see this slide, dating back to 2013. It summarizes the regulations that exist on disabilities, talking about disabilities. It's like a jungle of references, of types and laws and ministerial decrees and so on and so forth. The main reference point is that of the Law 104, with all its integrations and Enneadi and so on. But unfortunately, it is not influenced by the biopsychosocial model. So the idea of the person with a handicap, the definition of severe, continuous or permanent support, the relationship, and Article 4 of the Law 104 tells us that there is the medical check carried out by the medical commission defined by the local health unit. It is a medical certificate defining this condition.
E quindi vai, cosa è successo? È un autoavanzamento.
So in
Quindi la legge
2000, with the law 328, something interesting happens, because it says it's not so much a certification aspect, but we need an individual project for these people, and there are diagnostic evaluation, the education plan, services for people, economic measures, and it is interesting because all these things that should be included in just one individual project for disabled person are managed by different institutions, like diagnosis or care rehabilitation by the National Health Unit, and then services to the person are carried out by municipalities and so on. So there is this urge of summarizing the situation. The law of 2016 mentions for the first time the biopsychosocial model and the ICF classification. So this was in 2001. ICF, and then we are here in 2016. So interesting. And then it also indicates in the debate in ascertain disabilities, so how to verify this condition. It is kind of a hot topic.
Un po' problematici, diciamo così, meno assertivi.
And then last reference was the law 27 2017, number 205. And it also gives this definition of family caregiver. So the person who cares and looks after the person with disabilities. So it is not forgotten, but it is mentioned, and there is a law, as Fulvio said before, on the caregiver, which should systemize this profile, this person. So in this context, we have a problem. So the acquired disabilities after a trauma, so life trajectories are getting stopped, and that they change direction, so they change project. So you should not help it in fading or aging, but it's a life project that shifts completely, and so it already has a specific condition. And we have a hard time in defining all this. How can we define several support needs? How can we explain the severe cases? Are they only identified by medical certificate? How we can identify different type of population? So if we consider what we have available, we only have 2 tools today that are available. The idea of severity, so invalidity, and then the fact that you are not self-sufficient and you are accompanied, so, and then you have a percentage, so you have 3 degrees, and an age-based criterion, so under 18, from 18 to 65, and over 65.
Categoria alla quale mi onoro di appartenere, ma non vedo.
And there was another attempt in classifying.
Classificazione o di suddivisione.
Rare diseases represent like a borderline experience, and the amyotrophic sclerosis is included in this list of rare diseases and receives several protections linked to the definition of a rare disease. And in other cases, they said why that other disease cannot be included in the registry of rare diseases. But the topic of diagnosis could be a third axis, a third reference. And in the Italian experience that was used, but mainly the 2 factors that are considered are age, the fact of not being self-sufficient, and invalidity degree. Another model including diagnosis was the one adopted by the region Emilia-Romagna, DGR 2068. So we have age, So 65 years of age, severity.
Sta estendendo. La severità perché è
because the beneficiaries of the protection system include the very severe cases and the diagnosis, so acquired brain disease and impairment, and the outcomes of neuropathological diseases.
Patologie neurologiche involutive.
So the model of the Emilia-Romagna region in 2004 represented a pilot experience defining these three criteria. So these most severe people, according to this rule, are roughly 1,500 at regional level and 322 in Bologna. So the quantity of very severe cases for these three types of condition is the one we have just seen. An interesting aspect is included in the decree of the Ministry of Labour in 2016 for the National Fund for Non-Self-Sufficient People, and it is very interesting what is included inside this decree, because the first attempt was to define who is a very severe very severe person with disability. So the very severe people are the ones taking advantage of aids and allowances, and so this criterion of non-self-sufficiency. So the first criterion doesn't tell much, but to this we have to add another one. So they must enter in one of these 9 categories from A to I, so the condition of full dependence and associated to at least one of these conditions. Many are the diagnostic classification, so multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, or the neurodegenerative diseases, and then there are others because there is autism, sensorial impairment, B and E. We'll see them later because they speak about people undergoing non-invasive mechanical ventilation. And so for every single diagnostic category you have the clinical scoring, and there is a cutoff. So with this cutoff you can define who is a very severe person, with this very severe disabled person. It's not I think it's not suitable it's a paradox to use the Glasgow scale to define self-sufficiency, and then you have a scale and the cutoff of values, so diagnosis and severity. They are included in this non-self-sufficiency definition, and the assumption is just one. the complete dependence in ADL. So if we consider all the scale cutoffs, we see that they match with full dependence, with or without cognitive functions and aspects. So the cognitive side is not involved, but they refer to a full dependence in daily activities. So you need to be supported and assisted. So if we try and understand the rationale behind all this, the person that is defined as non-sufficient to obtain the certification for the law 104, and it is associated to another criterion, so the fact of being dependent in daily activities, or it is depending on a continuous non-invasive mechanical ventilation, or in case of severe brain injury. These criteria describe pretty well the person who becomes the beneficiary of protection and support services. And then each item says every person needing continuous assistance and support 24 hours a day, 7 out of 7, due to very severe psychophysical conditions.
Good luck.
So, in this case, to I, there is not a reference to the diagnostic condition. It says that despite the disease or the impairment to be included in this category, they have to be fully dependent in everyday activities or rarely taking decision or so one of these conditions and other conditions concerning breathing and nutrition, so the fact of having a tracheostomy or a daily support, or maybe to have a change in diet to ingest solid or liquids, or parenteral feeding with a central venous catheter. So regardless the type of cause, you find this condition of breathing or nutrition, so one or the other, you are included in this full dependence situation. So this decree at the beginning was not so clear, but by analyzing this, you understand that this criteria, that is a medical one, can be associated to another criterion, or a dependence of mechanical ventilation, or a severe impairment, and a third criterion, that is multiple sclerosis, Parkinson, brain injury, support for breathing or nutrition, and by combining these elements, you have this definition. So with the step forward, because it eliminates a kind of subjectivity, because it was not easy to define what was severe or not. So here you have a help to define something stricter from the definition point of view and from the decisional algorithm. And the decree itself says this is an experiment. Regions must collect data and they will be further treated.
Quindi, chiarito questo, ci sono anche gli altri, non gravissimi. I non gravissimi.
So the other services, and the answer is this one if we consider the transition of paradigm from hospital center rehab to a local rehab. And this is linked to the topic of chronic disease. So if you follow and if you, analyze this national plan, you see how the chronic diseases were dealt with.
E che la persona, queste sono parole che a noi sono molto care, penso Fulvio Maria.
So the person is an expert because it's of course, the knowledge, and it's an expert individual, and results are not aimed at improving the clinical condition, but the functional condition to minimize the symptoms, but in particular they must be linked to a global health project based on the development of pact of care. So the empowerment putting the person to the center, they become the key factors of a model moving towards the chronic model, chronic disease. And the community rehabilitation, that's what we like better, created in 1994 by WHO, UNESCO, and the International Organization of Labor, as a model to manage developing countries, and it has a conceptual scenario, a model that can be applied to any reality. In the chronic universe, it is acquiring a stronger level in order to manage rehab. There is a diagram that you can see here on the side, because at the core of all these models you have patient empowerment, family empowerment, informed and prepared communities, the interaction with skilled services, investing in the subjectivity of the person, of its environment for self-care processes. Even health policies must focus and converge on the same goals. So the non-severe, in this chronic word, you can deal with the topic of disability, and you can even understand something more.
la disabilità dopo neurotrauma sia un evento.
Because
siamo poco abituati invece a pensare che la disabilità dopo
it has a time development,
qualcosa che ha una sua dinamica temporale, un suo sviluppo.
and we are not so informed, even from a scientific point of view, what are the processes behind the long-term disability. If we consider long-term outcomes after a brain trauma, at 1 year, we have almost 80-90% of people with almost complete recovery or just marginal adaptations, and only 1% they have a major disability condition. So the spectrum of conditions is really wide, because 50% more or less have a full recovery with different degrees up to the very severe condition. So if we considered 1 year as 0 point, the situation evolves after 5 years in a remarkable way. I would like to show you this result concerning the spine trauma and lesions. Asian group 1 and 5 years, so you have an improvement, and there are cognitive deficits in 60% and a worsening situation. So many data tells us that the situation is not stable, that it's not static, it is dynamic instead. And this dynamic can also be led to 20-30% of people who improve over the years or worsen or remain stable. So why 20-30% of people tend to improve, in particular for cognitive aspects, and 20-30% of people tend to worsen? And it's a question that we have to ask ourselves, and the clinical research as well, because we do not have data over the long term. Probably all this is related to a trauma, a neurological trauma that triggers a neuroinflammation. In some cases, with a genetical landscape. Well, we don't know, but for sure 20-30% of people show inflammation processes that become chronic, and the activity prolonged until 16, 17, 18, or dementia risks with one risk of 1.5, 1.6. We know from base studies that there are some aspects in common between the spine trauma or brain, the cytokines, pro-inflammatories, cytokines, all these conditions are common. And so why 20-30% of people improve and 20-30% of people worsen? Because, well, we don't know, but maybe there is a neurodegeneration process triggered by neuroinflammation, which is a target, first of all, of clinical research. We need to have more information. and from a nutritional point of view as well, because it's a multifactorial field of action where this aspect is not so relevant. So for sure, obesity, this metabolism, the movement restriction and all the consequences in disability, the impact is more or less severe. But can we orient through our nutritional strategy a better anti-inflammatory response in the person with disabilities, and so to act on this 20-30% of people who are predisposed to chronicity? This is my conclusion. Here you see the community rehabilitation, and I like this pyramid because you see that community and healthcare services are having common prepared, while then you have informed patient and family, and the motivation as well. It's concise diagram, and it represents the new organizational model of healthcare services. And in Bologna we are applying the PDTA models. They exist already for many diseases leading to a neurodisability. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Roberto, for this in-depth analysis. And now we are at the core of this project. So Marco Malaguti, please come in so that you can talk about nutrition and acquired disability. And then Mrs. Aurelia is going to end this conference. So as we said before, we are still wondering what is the role of nutrition. Something can be done, in particular if it is linked to other habits, to other factors. I would like to start my presentation with this image that is taken from a pretty recent publication, and it shows the factors of a healthy lifestyle. And in particular, it refers to people who suffered from brain trauma, and you see the person at the center. So the possibility of eating in a healthy manner, to practice physical activity, to have the possibility of taking part in the social context. With the Enneadi project, we are touching just one element, that is the healthy nutrition, and the factor co-occurring for a healthy lifestyle would remain the same. So the healthy lifestyles and life factors are the same even for the rest of the population. So good nutrition, healthy nutrition, and physical activity and so on. But what is the relation between physical disability and nutrition. The first one is the body weight, and it's the same type of relation that we have in the population at large. So when you increase weight, so being overweight or in a disability situation, it's a factor that leads you to other diseases that could be cardiovascular, neurodegenerative diseases, and so on. In the individual who suffered from spine injury or a head trauma, there are other factors summing up to it. Nutrition, for example, it has to do with the possibility of the person to be fed. So food, the type of food should be considered and based on their palatability and so on. While the body weight is so important, here you see a graph and you see how it changes after the trauma. In the first weeks, there is an abrupt decrease in the body weight of the individual and loss of lean mass, characterizing the total body weight, due to the fact that usually, of course, the person cannot move. So the following years, we observe a progressive recovery first of body mass and then an increase in body weight compared to our weight before the trauma. So what are we recovering and what is increasing in the body of the person? And it's the fat mass. The fat mass is increasing. And so the person who was afflicted by head trauma or spine injury is in an overweight condition or even obesity. I think we probably already saw this table. It is clarifying the body mass index and the different ranges. And I think we are all familiar with these figures. So these ranges defining our weight condition cannot be applied to people with acquired disabilities. There is an interesting article which attempted at reclassifying these ranges based on the type of injury the person had. And so for like a tetraplegic subject, the ranges were different. So if maybe this person was considered as a general person, it would be overweight, while in case of tetraplegia, it would be considered as obese, with all the relevant complications that are typical of the population at large, and even more for disabled people, like difficulty in moving. As Fabio Laporta said before, this can have a strong impact, for example, on the ability to be included in social life. So it is then related to skin lesions or to develop chronic degenerative diseases. This is true for everyone, but we saw before that we are still wondering what happens in the following years, in the years following the trauma. So being obese or overweight for sure worsens this situation. To it, then you have to add other factors like a worsening of the sleep quality and the attention vis-à-vis caregivers and relatives, or they see their difficulty increasing. So with this small diagram, I wanted to summarize the relation between obesity, brain head trauma, and neurodegenerative diseases. We saw before that these diseases are developed on an inflammatory basis. So the traumatic event triggers inflammation, and then it enhances progressive neurodegeneration. We know that the condition of obesity has similar characteristics because it determines a standard level of inflammation that is higher compared to a non-obese person. So if the problem overlaps with that triggered by trauma, of course the outcome is worst. So we can skip this.
La relazione tra obesità e
the relation between obesity and comorbidity and acquired disability, they can be cardiovascular, inflammatory diseases, or like type 2 diabetes. Cardiovascular diseases, and in case of spine injury, they seem to hit almost 2/3 of the population of these people. So we are basically adding risk factors to people who already have an acquired disability. So let's see what we are doing with the Enneadi project, if nutrition can play a role. We are referring not so much to what nutrition can do in the short term, so soon after the trauma, but in particular what can be done in the medium-long term. With the Enneadi project, we started from a comparison between the guidelines of the 3 partner countries, Spain, Lithuania, and Italy, as for healthy nutrition. This is true in the food area, and it concerns people with or without disabilities. And then we wanted to compare these guidelines, and we identified some recurring elements. concerning the population at large.
Hanno sezioni dedicate a indicazioni.
So you see some nutritional behavior, so the importance of distributing the elements, taken during the day, in particular focusing on breakfast. In the 3 countries, it is pointed out how important it is to control one's weight, so to keep an active lifestyle. The 3 guidelines highlight the importance of water consumption and water intake, and the consumption of fresh food, and the reduction in fat intake and salt. And then we can see the indications that can be given to the person with a spine injury. This is probably the only publication available. It was published in 2014 by a Swedish group of doctors, and the title was The Art of Healthy Living with Physical Impairments. And the indications that are defined can be overlapped with what we saw before for the population at large. So eat less food containing saturated fats, preferring complex carbohydrate sources, or the consumption of fresh vegetables, and the decrease of sugar drinks, a decreased consumption of sugar drinks. Why? So this kind of nutrition can be useful because it touches also other aspects of our daily life, like nutrition that is rich in fiber with a lot of water that can, for example, contribute to solve sepsis problems that are very common in these people. And then a food rich in fresh fruit and vegetables. It is a type of nutrition that is rich in substances which contribute to counter that inflammation that we mentioned before. So the general indication for food are not so different in the person with acquired disability. For sure, in this letter, the effect of a healthy nutrition will be evident even before. And then there are other elements that can be interesting. We see in literature some nutrients that were applied in specific contexts. For example, the usefulness of polyunsaturated fat, like the omega-3, thanks to their positive effect on the central nervous system. They can enhance, fight neuroinflammation, or vitamin D for our neuroprotective role, or the branch amino acids. It has been demonstrated that this element is lacking. And the last couple of slides should focus on one of the factors concerning lifestyle and physical activity.
Quindi non ci soffermeremo più di tanto, però soggetti affetti da
subjects suffering from spinal cord injury and carrying out at least 50 minutes of physical activity per week
chiaramente una condizione ponderale, un peso,
show a reduced fat mass compared to the other people who do not exercise, even if their fat mass is higher than the general population. So I think the specialists, the professionals focusing on adapted physical activity, I think they can help these people, suggesting one type of physical activity rather than another one. It is, of course, not enough to say, please exercise and work out, but you have to choose in a scientific manner what is the most suitable activity. And this is a table showing guidelines based on volume and physical activity in people with spinal cord injury. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Malaguti. Now I give the floor to Silvana Areglia, University of Bologna, the Department of Sciences for the Quality of Life. Thank you. I have the honor to conclude this morning session with a speech that wants to be like a cross-sectorial summary concerning the problems relating to nutrition and brain, because despite what the advertising says, brain does not just need sugar. It requires other components like brain boosters, not just the vaccine one, but also protective action against neurodegenerative diseases. So the problem relies on the fact that despite the presence of spinal cord or brain injuries, the population is aging, and this is a worldwide trend. In 2050, people over 65 will represent a high percentage. And what does it mean? That with aging, chronic degenerative diseases will predominate. So, and the ratio between over 50 and under 50 would be upside down, reversed. Even in developing countries where the percentage of young people is much higher compared to developed countries. So this problem will hit all the countries in the world. So population that is aging, and what is aging? I think it's one of the things that is so hard to define because it's a physiological function, or as Confucius said, is the only disease that cannot be treated. And of course the only alternative is dying, so of course welcome aging. It is a decline of physiological functions, increasing susceptibility to diseases and toxic agents, and increasing the likelihood of death. But it's a slow process and a multifactorial complex one. To this process, you have other factors that are involved, like genetic ones, external factors like the environment, our lifestyle, and everything that can impact and modify lifestyles. They all have an influence on our ability to age well or badly. So the lifespan is prolonged, and we have to deal with it. And since the lifespan is prolonged, there are problems concerning the aging body. We are aerobic body, we breathe oxygen. Oxygen is fundamental for our life, but it is also one of the most toxic substances on Earth. We can be considered as a balustrade that is exposed to weather conditions. It can be attacked by rust, so we are like iron rail guards exposed to oxygen, and we are covered in rust. And this is the oxidative stress, and aging derives from an accumulation of oxidative damages to tissues and cells. So every single DNA molecule of every cell, every single day of our life is attacked by 10,000 species. And so if we consider an average age of 80 years, we undergo 300 millions of oxidative damages. If this was not offset, the human species, human beings won't be here any longer. So we have a defense mechanism on which we can work as well with our behavior. And aging is the main risk factor for most neurodegenerative diseases. Dementia, for example. It is estimated that people suffering from dementia can reach 35 million in 2050. And then even reaching 115 million in 2050. And then neurodegeneration in Italy as well, where we see the percentages of Alzheimer or Parkinson disease are slowly increasing. So we have to understand how we can act, not under treatment, because as you know, Alzheimer and Parkinson diseases are currently two diseases that cannot be treated, but we can work on the preventive factors. Alzheimer's disease is characterized by beta amyloid plaques, the agglomeration of neurofibers that can remove cognitive abilities to the person, and they can even alter from a morphological point of view the brain structure. And the Parkinson disease is related to dopamine neurotransmitter levels, and they affect neurons of the gray matter, and therefore determining movement and cognitive deficits. There are no treatments to solve this disease. They only slow down its evolution. They modify symptoms. I won't see the pharmacological class that is used in treating the Alzheimer and Parkinson disease, because I prefer to explain what we can do with our lifestyle to slow down this neurodegenerative processes. So we have to understand how brain reacts to the oxidative stress and how we can counter these actions. Brain represents just 2% of our body weight, but it takes 1/5 of the entire amount of oxygen that we breathe every day. So just imagine how much rust can accumulate in the brain mechanisms and and fat as well. It's rich in copper and iron. The release of neurotransmitters can generate oxidative responsive. And CO2 as well is another molecule that can enter the brain. So brain is exposed to oxidative stress. It has low level of antioxidant agents, and neurons are cells that do not replicate. So once they are damaged, they cannot repair. There is a leitmotif taking together these neurodegeneration processes, including those that can take place after a trauma, after injury. And this is inflammation, the word or neuroinflammation, that's the leitmotif. So the current strategies and future strategies to prevent neurodegenerative diseases must consider neuroinflammation and must hit targets at the basis of neuroinflammation to focus not so much on damaged cells, but by avoiding that these cells entail an apoptosis process that is related to neurodegeneration and neuroinflammation. And the common factor concerns all these protein dysfunctions and neuroinflammation in particular. What is it? It was called the bad pain, which is different from the good pain. That is the one we feel when, for example, we hit against something and then you have an edema, and this is the immediate reaction to a trauma, while neuroinflammation is a silent process, is cytokine mediated because it depends on the evolution of these substances like interleukins. It has a short life but extremely important from a biological point of view. It can create a systemic damage in the tissue. So despite the good pain, it is completely without symptoms and difficult to check. So what does our brain can do? There is a kind of genetics behind our adaptive response, so our brain can undergo or can respond. As we saw before, some individuals can recover, some others are getting worse. Why? Probably there is a genetic predisposition for sure, but most of the time factors that can co-occur are manifold. And nutrition and lifestyle, they can help in moving this balance that was altered towards an adaptive response, which means to avoid the neuron death, because we saw they do not replicate, so once they are dead, that's it. So what therapeutical approaches can we have to counter neuroinflammation? Many assumptions were presented, but probably the most important one I'm trying to go back to my slides. So one of the most important factors is to use substances that can be antioxidant but also anti-inflammatory. And so these substances can also be chemical ones, because the pharmaceutical industries are working on these issues. They are developing new compounds thanks to the in silico techniques, helping the ex novo design of new drugs, and the attention turned towards natural compounds that are included in our nutrition. So based on different studies and epidemiologic studies, we saw that some food constituents, in particular vegetable ones, belonging to the flavonoids, molecules in small concentrations, which play a fundamental role in biology, they can counter the neurodegenerative processes by hitting the target of neuroinflammation. So our life expectancy increases, and it's okay, but the number of risk factors increases as well, which could lead us to a neurodegenerative disease. So it is our duty, and it is also one of the standardized goals of this project, to outline nutritional or therapeutical interventions to slow down and to counter the development of these neurodegenerative diseases. So what do we have to look for? We have to look for substances with an antioxidant role, which can increase our endogenous defense against the oxidative stress. Elements of our food, elements of our nutrition, they can upregulate. That means they can increase our antioxidant defenses, protecting us for a longer period in a wider, broader spectrum. Vis-à-vis the most devastating effects. So these molecules and flavonoids so this food sector, food industry that is so complex, and it implies the use of some common food in our diet that are the fundamental factor of the Mediterranean diet, which has been considered and defined by UNESCO as intangible heritage, like, for example, red berries, or the extra virgin olive oil, or the resveratrol in red wine, or the sulfurate in the like cabbage and turmeric as well, which presents some well-known neuroprotective abilities. Green tea, it has been studied for years because it has the so-called green tea catechins with important antioxidant characteristics, and it is a modulator of cell death after the exposure to an oxidative stress. All these ways were studied in detail and published on several journals to demonstrate how nature can provide us with food, including substances that can act as a protector and a preventive agent. Neuroinflammation is a well-known topic, and like a stroke or brain ischemia and its neurodegenerative outcomes, they are considered and included in the neuroinflammatory processes. So a common vision and a common target for different diseases that have a point in common. And this is the neuroinflammation event. I would like to show you just some examples. Resveratrol. It's inside red wine, which is part of our diet in the Mediterranean region. It is taken from grape, and then it goes through the wine, and if you take it with your diet, it is bioavailable. It reaches at any level brain cells, where it can work by inducing an enzyme, which is an oxygenase, and at brain level we should consider it as our large protective umbrella. So the more the oxygenase activity is there, and the more our brain is protected. So to induce the oxygenase means to retrieve, to recover the blood flow, to reduce the neuronal death, to increase the antioxidant capacity at brain level. Of course, these molecules can be found also like food supplements in a concentrated way. And its use in a concentrated way actually is still not so well known, and it was not studied in an in-depth way. We are talking about food, we are talking about intaking a normal intake through the diet. Nutrition can be one of the most important factors in playing a preventive role against Alzheimer's disease. And we also discovered what are the key food: fish, olive oil, cereals, and wine. So this is the Mediterranean diet. This is not new to us, to what our grandparents used to eat, and So we need to go back to our origin in order to take a step forward, because we know that this food not only protects our health, but they also protect in a specific way our brain. Olive oil, it's a pharma food with some neuroprotective components that is usually 230 milligrams per kilo per liter, and in particular two of them. One is hydroxytyrosol, the other is European oil, and the third one that is Canta oil that has been defined as ibuprofen-like. So its chemical structure is similar with ibuprofen. One of the most powerful anti-inflammatory molecules. And so by using olive oil, we also take some specific anti-inflammatory agents. This is a paper published on Nature, which is like our Bible. So our nutrition can help us in taking anti-inflammatory agents, helping us in this progressive process. Here you see the structure of the molecules oleocantal and ibuprofen below. So the extra virgin olive oil, thanks to its component, it can protect us from Alzheimer's disease. It can counter the initial phases of Parkinson's disease. It can define an anti-inflammatory effect, which could contribute to move from phenotype responding negatively to a positive responding phenotype inside this process of nutritional scheme.
Avanti, per favore. Avanti ancora. Ecco, non mi...
I won't focus on the mechanism of action. What I just wanted to say is that there is another intracellular target, which is transcriptase factor, NRF2, and this transcriptase factor has been defined in the States as the core of the issue, because if it is hit by a food element, it can activate a whole set of natural defense mechanisms. And as I was saying, in the US, you find NF2 activators with the name superfood. But what I said on olive oil, extra virgin olive oil and its components is included in this category of transcriptase factors, and therefore it is considered as superfood. And then the phytochemicals, where we can find them, how do they act, how can we use them, and in which situation can we use them. And we go back to the initial topic, so the Mediterranean diet. It can be defined in one word. It's a nutraceutical. So it's a fusion between pharmaceutical and nutrition, and it shows this food having a protective and preventive action for our health. I described neurodegenerative diseases, I mentioned red berries, broccoli, or
i bersagli molecolari. Bene, tutti questi
all these components are nutraceuticals, and they are the signature of our diet, so rich in food, providing important benefits for our health. So what is nutraceutical? It is one of the main pillars of the predictive medicine that is moving towards a preventive medicine, which is going to be the medicine of the future, in my opinion, as well. We have to study healthy people because we want to understand why they are healthy and they age in a healthy manner. What are the mechanisms that can predispose their body to a successful aging? Only if we can understand healthy people and if we understand the mechanisms behind the health protection, then we can make a step forward in understanding and treating diseases. So nutraceutical is this link between preventive, predictive medicine. And as Fulvio said, some years ago, I had fun in writing this dissemination booklet, and its title is To Nourish Brain, and I wanted to explain in some simple words how these components, nutraceutical components, can help our brain to age well, to keep its functions for a longer term, and how specific food can protect us, and we will see the results in a few years, can protect us from neurodegenerative diseases. So let's nourish our brain, which does not need only sugar, but many other molecules to defend itself and to age successfully, because the quality of life concerns all of us. And rather than increasing the number of years, it is better to add life to years, because quality of life doesn't mean to be without any disease, but it means to have the proper psychological, physical balance, allowing us to have a perfect relation with the external environment. I will purify my language. Thanks, Mr. Laporta, for what you taught us. But in any situation, we must do our best in the society where they live. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Silvana Relia. So you saw this morning, this rich morning, what are the potentials of this Enneadi project, the reasons, the recommendations that we hope can result from this project. Elena Vignocchi, we are a little bit behind schedule, but if you have questions for the speakers of this morning, it's 1 p.m. now, but if there are questions, Paula, I don't know if you are online from Spain. Are there any questions?
Siamo... non so se mi senti.
You can follow us on the website of the project Enneadi, and we will testing the online course, the online training pathway to a group of professionals. So if you want to test this training pathway in order to give us your feedback for improvement, please email us so that you can book a place for this learning pathway. Project is going to end November 22. So we have several important steps, and then there will be a final event to discuss about the outcomes. So thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea and the Teatro Dehon, for the hospitality. Thank you.
Grazie a Fulvio.